Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, May 27th, 2025, and our friend Pepe Escobar is back with us. Welcome back, Pepe.
My pleasure to be with you, Nima, and with all of you. By the way, very important, the summit happening in my neighbors down south, China, GCC, and ASEAN. Very important day today.
Yeah. Before going there, Pepe,
Yes.
wh- what's your take on? We had a phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and he came out of the phone call. He said that Ukraine and Russia are going to talk to each other. They're going to find some sort of solution. And yesterday, he just came out and saying that what Russia is doing is just killing not only soldiers but civilians. And Putin wants all of Ukraine, not just the eastern part of Ukraine. And this is the downfall of Russia. What's going on in the mind of the Trump administration and Donald Trump himself, in your opinion?
Well, Nima, it's a recurrent theme in all our discussions for months. How unreliable, volatile, and sometimes downright demented this accumulation of Trump narratives can be. And the fact that because he's a master of narrative, controlling narrative, changing narratives, and twisting narratives, we never know what we're going to get next, which in this case is particularly worrying. Like we were discussing before the official start of our conversation today. There are three possibilities, and all of them are terrifying, to say the least. He took this out of his own narcissistic head, which in itself is an enormous problem because it's a typical two or three observations that are completely disconnected from reality, hurling accusations out of the blue. Number two, he has been manipulated by the circle who's very close to him, not many, but the people who he actually listens, even if it's for 10 seconds or so. Most of them, as we know, are extreme Russophiles. For instance, that basically that enormous Cold War imbecile, a relic from the Cold War, Kellogg. So he actually believes what they told him, maybe because he didn't even took the pains to put it in context, like what Russia has been doing this past 2 or 3 days is as a response to swarms of drone attacks against different parts of the Russian Federation, Moscow itself, and Putin's helicopter when he was going to Kursk. So obviously, the response has to be absolutely devastating, as it is, and it hasn't finished yet. And number three possibility is pressure from the deep state and silos inside the deep state, controlled by the usual suspects. You in our audience, you know who we're talking about, are forcing Trump to come up with that as a sort of impersonated by the saying, playing good cop, bad cop by himself to try to extract something from Russia, which everybody who follows what's going on with the SMO for the past 3 and something years knows that nothing is going to divert the Russians from their initial mission with the SMO. So the non-response by Medvedev on a Twitter X again, which was quite funny, but not so funny in a way that was extremely realistic. If this goes on like this, the so-called buffer zone in Ukraine is going to be 98% of Ukraine, which is quite realistic, which is something that could happen within the next, let's say, year or year and a half. Not to mention everybody around who's going to go for a morsel of post neo-Nazi Ukraine, Hungary, Poland, Romania, everybody. But the problem, the key problem with this Trump outburst, which is once again a temper tantrum thrown by a childish leader. It reflects horribly on him again, but that's we are all used to it. Is the total absence of contextualization. Very, very important, Nima. There is already a new meme that is the overarching meme coming out of this whole thing, which is now going to be brandished by the usual suspects 24/7. And the meme is Putin is crazy. So from now on, the whole narrative is going to be Putin is crazy. And everything that is being done by Kiev, by the Chihuahuas in Europe, and even by the Trump administration, there is a rationale. Putin is crazy. So Trump may have unleashed the non-ending of the SMO for the foreseeable future. It's possible. We don't know. Tomorrow, he's going to come up with something completely different. And tomorrow he's going to say, I'm going to call Putin again. We don't know. As it stands, there is an enormous danger that the whole process now is totally derailed. There's talk of non-confirmed, very dodgy sources. So we can take this with, I would say, a barrel of salt and pepper. That there's going to be a new set of sanctions against Russia, not including Russian banks. We don't know. It's pure speculation. And of course, assuming that there's going to be another phone call in the next few days, or if he's going to say once again, I'm fed up, I'm out of here. All of these possibilities are feasible. So once again, coming back to one of the main themes of our conversation for months, how can you have a diplomatic process engage with a narcissistic personality like this, completely unreliable, and throwing temper tantrums like he's a 4-year-old? It's impossible. Enter, once again, the immense patience of President Putin. Peskov, which once again, Peskov went, I think from yesterday to this morning, he said, yes, the process is very complicated. It's back and forth. We have to be patient. It's very emotional as well. Trying to circumvent Trump's dementia. But sooner or later, Putin himself is going to lose his patience because he's being heavily criticized. And this is something that I'm back in Moscow in 2 days. So I have in the next few weeks, I'll have plenty of time to talk to some well-positioned people and ask them, how deep is the discontent among the Russian ruling classes with this non-ceasefire process? Because everybody knows that there's not going to be a ceasefire that Russia will admit, considering the list that we all know very well of Russian demands. And the fact that Kiev is breaking a sort of understanding non-stop with swarms of drones literally every day. We can count by tens one day, sometimes nearly 100, sometimes more than 100, but it's every day. So obviously, the Russian response is going to be even more devastating than it was 2 or 3 days ago. So the possibility of a ceasefire is less than zero. The possibility of having some point of connection between Witkoff on one side and, let's say, the Russian delegation on the other, same thing. The possibility of another meeting in Istanbul between both delegations. The Russians say, look, we have practically ready our the guidelines for an agreement leading to a ceasefire. The Ukrainians, as far as we know, they're not even working on it because they have only one strategy, is to prolong the war ad infinitum. Assuming, of course, assuming no, they assume that Europeans are going to pick up the slack from the Americans. That's not a given. So, and compared to, let's say, last week, the process is now is even more complicated and leading towards a dead end now than it was a week ago. And it tends to get worse, Nima.
The problem is, Pepe, we know that the United States is providing Ukraine with the intelligence about the targets. You mentioned the drone attacks,
Yes.
and the U.S. Navy reconnaissance aircraft is just moving in that region, preparing everything, gathering everything to
They're back in
give
the
it.
Black Sea. Did you see it?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would argue how Vladimir Putin can respond to him just so logically. He doesn't need to make something up. He has the evidence. He can show to Donald Trump. What are you doing? You're helping Ukrainians to attack us while you pretend that you want to negotiate with us.
Of course. And this is something that the Russian Minister of Defense or the Russian Minister of Foreign Relations can hand over to their. Now they have some interlocutors in Washington easily. Facts, numbers, attacks. The fact that the Americans continue to send weapons to Ukraine, the previous batch, not new ones, but the previous batch, still going. Intimidations in the Black Sea and in the Baltics. Concerted NATO intimidation in the Baltics, with the Russians already said, "Oh yeah, you're going to try to take us out of the Baltic Sea. Good luck with that." And now Russian cargo tankers, etc., they will fly protected by the Russian military apparatus, intelligence, maritime drones, aerial drones, you name it. So you won't have some absolutely ridiculous Estonian Chihuahua Navy or whatever provoking Russia again in the Baltics anytime soon. If they do, the response is going to be, off with their heads. Alice in Wonderland, in fact. So the facts are all there, but we're not dealing with an administration that respects facts. We all know that. It's only narratives, and it's only a narrative constructions constructed in the head of the circus ringmaster. So it had to come to this dead end. It was very predictable. It was swimming too nicely for a few weeks, and with all these blah blah blahs that we're going to have a ceasefire or an agreement. So of course not. Of course not. And this, once again, this Medvedev scenario, which was half in jest, like he was playing, sooner or later is going to be the scenario followed by Russia. Okay, we can go on for another 5 years, even more. It's exactly what Medinsky told the Ukrainian delegation in Istanbul. Are you ready to fight for another 5 years? We are. We can go for 5, 8, 10. We don't care. It took us 21 years to defeat the Swedes. No problem.
You remember you remember, Pepe, there was an article in the Financial Times, if I'm not mistaken. It was that Britain, together with France and Germany, they vowed that they're going to do everything at their disposal to avoid any sort of Ukrainian settlement, just to
Yes.
block the talks between the United States and Russia. Here comes yesterday the German Chancellor Merz. He announced that Britain, together with France and Germany and the United States, have lifted restrictions on the range of military supply to Ukraine. They're getting everything they wanted to get from the United States. They're just playing Donald Trump in their hands, it seems
Of
to me,
course.
when it comes to Ukraine.
And
I would wonder if Donald Trump knows what's going on.
no, he doesn't. And when he finds out, assuming he finds out that how he's being played by the European chihuahuas, expect another series of demented narrative twists. For the moment, he thinks that he is on top of the game and the Europeans are bowing down to him. No, they have their own strategy, with, if we can call it that, their own demented forever war plan against Russia. That was the theme of my latest column so far, when I was talking about the European kakistocracy, the reign of the worst. How the European kakistocracy is totally involved, immersed, and subjugated by a forever war logic against Russia, no matter what happens, no matter if there is an implosion of NATO, no matter if Trump decides to abandon negotiations. The Europeans, from France and Germany to the Chihuahuas, and including the UK, of course, that's it. They cannot back off, back down. There's no way out. There's no ramp, nothing. And of course, the Kremlin and the Russian Minister of Defense, they know that very well. They are planning ahead. That's why we hear, I would say for the moment, is rumors, echoes, etc., of a major offensive this summer. It may or may not happen, and it could be a series of minor offensives, not necessarily all over the chessboard, but they will keep advancing and grabbing territory and expanding the front line and expanding what Putin has defined officially as a buffer zone. But it's basically to keep the neo-Nazi setup in Kiev as far away as possible from the borders of Novorossiya, which continue to expand and will involve other regions. So once again, what Medinsky said in Istanbul was immensely important. I think was the key observation by Medinsky to the Ukrainians in Istanbul was that, look, you don't want the 4 regions now belonging to the Russian Federation. And next time, it's not going to be 4. What they said actually is going to be 8. And we all know what that means. Dnipropetrovsk, Odessa, everything. So this is where this is heading. Absolutely. The Russians know it. They already telegraphed to the Ukrainians that this is what's going to happen if you don't accept our demands now. The Europeans apparently got the message. Now they're redoubling their warmongering dimension. Let's put it this way. And of course, don't forget, the people in the deep state silos in Washington, in Virginia, in Maryland, etc., they also got their message and said, look, that's it. And if we leave, you will be admitting our strategic defeat, which is the last thing that the empire can do. And this is how they interpret Trump negotiating with Putin. They interpret it as the US having to admit a strategic defeat. And that's the case. It is. This is the reality. Because the terms of the capitulation will be framed by the victor. And once again, in this war of narratives, we have the losers, the big power on the other side, trying to frame the mode of capitulation of its proxy. It's beyond absurd. Everything is absurd. But we are in the middle of an immense theater of the absurd now, where the main character is I would say, the absurdist character by definition, Donald Trump. And on the other side, the Russians look at all that with their mix of Taoist patience and ruthlessness as well, and long-term planning. They said, okay, no problem. This is going the way we wanted in the first place. Demilitarization is not ended. It's going to take a while. Denazification is going to take a long time. This is what we wanted from the beginning. So we continue to do what we were doing. Nothing's going to alter that. Nothing. The only thing that would alter that, Nima, and all of you, our audience, would be the President of the United States actually recognizing a de facto strategic defeat of the whole collective West vis-a-vis Russia. Is this going to happen? Never.
Pepe, when we talk about denazification, in my opinion, the process of denazification is much on depends on what's going on in Ukraine in the aftermath of a Ukrainian settlement in terms of who's gonna come to power, who's gonna run Ukraine, the western part of Ukraine. Do you think in the mind of Russian is all about military operation, or it considers the political parties, the political movements in Ukraine, in the western part of Ukraine, in the aftermath of any agreement?
Of course, there are a few priorities. Number one, whatever happens politically in Kiev after some sort of settlement, it can never be what we have now, which is a system of government, basically a system of plunder, extremely corrupt to the core, controlled by neo-Nazis behind a puppet. That's priority number one. Priority number two, of course, is absolutely demilitarized. No military threat towards the Russian Federation. If they want to get into the EU, that's not Russia's problem. They can get into the EU as long as it's not militarized NATO style and these weapons are not directed against the Russian Federation. These are the priorities. So this is something that can even take decades. And we're not exaggerating. It will take years, and it may take decades. What the Kremlin sees is the big picture, long term. They're really looking at what many of us have been describing as the new great game. Yes, it is. This is one of the key chapters of the new great game. And they're looking already at 2030, 2035, 2040. This is what it means. This is the inner meaning of Putin saying addressing the root causes of the conflict. This is it. Comes back to everything that we know: NATO expansion, subjugation of Kiev, the coup in 2014, the neo-Nazis controlling the whole machinery, everything. The people who are financing these neo-Nazis, you name it. All that has to disappear for Russia to say, okay, that's it. We got to settle. As long as these elements continue, no settlement. It's simple as that.
What's the game of Europe in Ukraine? I don't see any sort of objective on their part but the continuation of the conflict. So if you, as I talked with Colonel Jacques Beau, he said that there is no strategy because there is no
Absolutely
goal to
correct.
talk about on the part of Europeans. Who, let's assume they can somehow drag Donald Trump into the conflict and this concept of the continuation of the conflict. What would come out of that for Europeans?
First of all, they won't drag Trump. Trump wants to get out of it because for him as a businessman, this is not cost effective. Trump will only allow, let's say, this state of things to continue if the Europeans continue to buy American weapons and 5% of their GDP, all of them, indiscriminately. Then he might say, okay, it's your war, keep going. We're out of it. But we have to buy everything from us. That's it. It's a business, once again, it's a business transaction. Of course, all of us who have been following the SMO from the beginning, from day one, Europe has no tactics and no overall strategy. What they had was, I would say, a very limited plan A, which is we throw everything against Russia in the first few days. We destroy their economy. These were words of assorted European functionaries for days in 2022. And then, of course, it's going to be a mess. There could be a regime change. Putin will be out. Russia will be fragmented. And then we pounce and we grab everything. This was plan A from the beginning. There was never a plan B. When they started to notice that the blowback, cosmic blowback of the whole thing, not even then we had, I don't know, European Marshall Fund, these horrible things, Chatham House in London, or a collection of European think tanks to sit on the table and come up with a strategy. No, they still don't have a strategy. The only strategy from the beginning was, let's undermine the Russian Federation, let's blow up Russia from the inside and from the outside as well, with sanctions, SWIFT, you name it. And they cannot deal with blowback, first of all, because they don't understand blowback, and they don't understand the causes of blowback, which will imply that they will have to restudy their mistakes from the beginning, which they don't, because of their innate arrogance mixed with an imbecility off the charts. And this applies to leadership of the EU, leadership of the European Commission, the European Parliament, the European Central Bank, NATO, everything, the whole complex. So, absolutely correct. And there will never be a strategy. What we're looking at now, which was one of the themes of my latest column, one of the key reasons why they need to keep going, the famous $50 billion loan to Kiev, which was split between the EU and the G7. It's roughly 35 billion EU, 50 billion G7. But guess who has to pay back the loan? The European Union. With what funds? Zero, because they don't have it. Nobody has it. And I'm sure many of you, our audience, know that the scam that they devised is that this loan is going to be financed by the Russian frozen funds, actually stolen. There are in Europe mostly through Euroclear in Brussels. Obviously, assuming that they would do that, the blowback from Russia would be absolutely devastating for European companies and for the assets that Europeans still have in Russia. Number one. Number two, this will destroy the euro completely. Can you imagine any nation in the global south, not to mention many in the global north, having any confidence in the euro? After that, impossible. And still, Nima, this is the plan. And this plan was approved by European directives, EU directives. It's written in stone, signed, stamped, the whole thing. It's an official EU decision. And the whole thing goes, do you know for how long? 45 years. Which means in practice, as I didn't want to be so blunt, but I put it in my column, the European Union has committed to declare war against Russia for the next 45 years. This is the result of all that, the practical conclusion of all that. So they cannot back down. Follow the money. Always. This is the classic follow the money. And this is the number one explanation why they cannot back down. They need to pay this bloody loan. How are they going to do that? Voila, this is a. It's absolutely disgusting, but it makes sense when you put all these pieces of the puzzle together. It makes sense, and explains the fact that they have no strategy. They're trying to basically save their own heads and try to prevent a collapse of the whole European financial system, political leaderships everywhere, the EU and DEC as a whole, the whole Kafka mechanism of the European Union, the European Commission, basically save Brussels from itself. They can't. They're too dumb for that, Nima, because they don't think strategically.
We know part of sanctions. We the Biden administration tried everything on Russia, and
Yes.
together with Europeans, they were much more unified than they are the United States with Europeans right now. If we assume that Donald Trump wants to threaten, wants to intimidate Russia into some sort of agreement that he wants, Donald Trump wants from Russia, how much power do they possess right now in terms of who's buying Russian energy? It's China and India mostly. And how much pressure can they put on these two countries? With China, I don't see that much, but how about India? Go ahead.
India, exactly. India is an enormous problem. Yes, they can put a lot of pressure on India, especially because now India, after their disastrous adventure, military adventure against Pakistan, now they are even more discombobulated than they were before. And something that I've been discussing this in Asia a lot, the Hindutva problem, the direct connection between Hindutva and Zionism, the fact that India is alienating the lands of Islam as a whole and Muslim populations everywhere, not only in India and in South Asia. The fact that they don't know if they're going to have a prominent role in BRICS from now on or not. Probably other BRICS will start looking at India as more of a liability than as one of the BRICS, one of the the four original BRIC founders. So this is so they are susceptible to pressure, no question. And the fact that obviously the ruling elites in India, they still haven't made up their mind of what they want. Do they want to be a prominent Eurasia power in the 21st century, or they're going to be another Western colony, which is essentially a great deal of India still is. Enormous problem. But it's the weak link. Assuming Trump would like his deal, but possibly he's starting to see, Nima, even considering the fact that he's not a strategist and he doesn't think strategically, and he's not a thinker at all. On the contrary, he's starting to see that whatever deal he had in mind is not going to happen. It would only happen if he fully supports what Russia is telling him, address the root causes of this whole drama. And that implies re-evaluating the role of the US as a big power vis-a-vis Russia itself. It's a pretty serious business. Trump is not ready to do that. First of all, because the deep state will never allow him to do that. So his margin of maneuver is very slim. And on top of it, he's being manipulated by the Europeans. So to answer your question, his margin of maneuver is practically zero. And that may be a fourth explanation, Nima, to this outburst. Putin is crazy and he wants to destroy the whole of Ukraine. Frustration. Which, considering the character, makes sense. He's always used to have it his own way. When he doesn't, temper tantrum, it's typical of narcissistic personalities. They cannot face reality, especially when reality clashes against him like that.
Pepe, we had new a new train came from China to Iran, and it is somehow,
Oh,
it,
this is amazing.
yeah.
This
The
is
bad news
amazing.
you mentioned
Yeah.
about
Yeah,
India
go
can
ahead.
be compensated with the news.
Well, let's talk about something really groundbreaking, extraordinary. I've seen some of the itinerary of this train. For instance, it came from Xinjiang, crossed to Kazakhstan at Gorgos, which is an enormous entrepot crossroads between everything that comes from China has to go to Central Asia and beyond. Then Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, then Uzbekistan, finally Turkmenistan, and from Turkmenistan crossing to Tehran. It's immensely impressive. It's let's say a new variant of what the Chinese call the middle corridor. There are different middle corridors using from Xinjiang to Central Asia, and then you can go via Kazakhstan. There's the northern corridor that goes towards the Trans-Siberian, but this one is direct. So this is direct from the train started in Xi'an, if I'm not mistaken. So they did the Silk Road like the Silk Road was 2,000 years ago, from Xi'an to Persia. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And of course, it took 20 days, if I'm not mistaken, which is nothing. Very, very. So soon we can see swarms of Chinese trains back and forth throughout this middle corridor between, the old Silk Roads in China and Persia and back. Fascinating. And this happened only a few days ago after my trip, where I was looking at the maritime Silk Road in the Persian Gulf, the Sea of Oman, and then all the way to the Indian Ocean to Mumbai. So these are connectivity corridors in action. It's not the good news. It's the reliable expected news for the whole of Eurasia. It's the main theme of Eurasia in the 21st century. We are connecting and intraconnecting at breakneck speed.
You mentioned, Pepe, about ASEAN and what's going on in terms of we have these little groups within, I would say, within BRICS that they're communicating to each other.
Yes.
How is that going to influence both the conflict in the Middle East and with Russia, and how much important is what's going on with ASEAN and the organization like ASEAN?
Immensely important. I'm waiting for the final declaration, which is going to be tomorrow. Today was day one. They're having a gala dinner tonight as we speak. Yeah, as we speak, literally. And tomorrow they're going to have a final declaration. This is immense, Nima and all of you. On the same table, we have West Asia, Southeast Asia, and China. Wow. So this is 60, 70% of the Eurasia that matters. We don't have Russia, but India is completely out of this picture. And we don't have Central Asia. So we have at least 60% of Eurasia on the table. Powers in themselves, very important powers in themselves. China more than obvious, but ASEAN is the fourth largest big power in the world, all connected. The 10 of the ASEAN 10. And the GCC, of course. It's fascinating. What is fascinating is that how is the GCC, and when we talk about the GCC, we're talking about the big three, essentially, them, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, and Qatar. These are the big three. They were just visited by the circus ringmaster. They promised zillions of dollars to the circus ringmaster. We don't know what's going to happen, if this money is actually going to the American economy, how, for how long, etc. So it's like they more or less organized a spectacle to please the emperor, while at the same time looking at the people who really run the show and the people who are uh, rebuilding the system of international relations with China, of course, and the relationship China ASEAN, ASEAN 10. Fascinating. This is going to be good. And what is going to be decided today and tomorrow in Kuala Lumpur is going to influence BRICS in Rio in early July as well, because many of these will be at the table at BRICS in Rio in early July. There will be GCC representatives, there will be ASEAN representatives, Indonesia as a full BRICS member, and Thailand and Malaysia as partners, and China, of course. So I would say the consequences of these 2 days in Malaysia are enormous and will be felt, in the foreseeable future. But I was paying attention to what Mahathir was saying this morning. And Mahathir is extremely, extremely. I had a chance to meet him a long time ago, way before, in the beginning of his career, essentially, here in the 90s. And you remember that last year at the forum in St. Petersburg, he was on the same table with Putin. He was on stage with Putin. He stole the show. He's a master of PR, extremely well informed, and he has a clear vision, not only for Malaysia as a Muslim country with a very important Chinese diaspora business community. So Malaysia is looking everywhere, and also to India as well, and the Malay world, but a vision for ASEAN and the integration of ASEAN, what they call here in Southeast Asia, ASEAN unity. Very immensely important. And in terms of coordinating these new power centers of the future multipolar world, Malaysia is extremely important, and especially Malaysia telling other ASEAN members, look, this is the direction we should go together. Vis-a-vis China, where they are already integrated. The number one trade partner of all ASEAN 10 is China. But the Arabs, of course, which they want to invest in Southeast Asia, all over here, there are Arab business now all over the place, in Singapore, in Malaysia, here in Thailand, in Indonesia. So immensely important. And once again, these tidbits on the side. Indonesia and China from now on are going to trade only in their own currencies. It's only yuan and rupiah from now on. This is immense, immense. So this is just the foretaste of what's ahead. I'm very interested in the interconnection of what they're going to decide in Malaysia these 2 days, and how this is going to overspill to BRICS in a little over a month from now. This is going to be something to watch.
Pepe, is there something so special with ASEAN and organization like ASEAN to be somehow inspired by, I don't know, they can they may found some sort of solutions for the problems that they're facing, that which would be helpful for BRICS itself, because we know that the nature of talks within these organizations are somehow different from what's going on in BRICS.
Yes.
And how is that going to I would wonder if there is some sort of communication between the two to understand each other.
I hope there is, Nima, especially via Indonesia, which is now a top BRICS member, now full member. But also the Thais and the Malays, they plan to be very active inside BRICS. This is something I talked here with my Thai connections, absolutely, and something that we know from Malaysia since Anwar's spectacular performance last year in Russia. The ASEAN always privileges consensus. It's a very polite organization, if I can put it this way. Everybody respects each other. They don't force anything on other members. The 10 sit on the table and actually discuss everything. For instance, all the problems in the South China Sea are discussed on the same table by all ASEAN members. And when China is there, they discuss this openly with China, ASEAN as an ASEAN 10 and China. South China, okay. The key issue in geopolitical terms, of course, the South China Sea. So this is something that they can bring to BRICS as well and make it more amenable, because there are internal problems in BRICS and expanded BRICS now. For instance, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, it's still a complicated situation. Like the Chinese and the Russians have to manage that inside BRICS. And of course, the role of India inside BRICS is under a lot of scrutiny. And don't forget that now we have the Persians and we have the Arabs on the same table with India. That makes it way more complicated, right? But BRICS can learn from ASEAN. That's a great thing. And guess who already was looking at it last year, even before last year? Putin. And guess who knows that this is the way China wants it to go? China, Xi Jinping. Because China has excellent relations, both with ASEAN and with GCC. So the fact that you have the three of them on the same table between today and tomorrow is beyond huge, because it will overspill to other multilateral organizations, and especially BRICS. It's very auspicious, really. It's one of the most auspicious news for the beginning of this year, which started with a bang, as we know.
Pepe, I think we're getting to the point before wrapping up this session. Just to wrap it up, we know that how important BRICS right now is when it comes to the conflict in Ukraine, Middle East, in Taiwan. But are they going to consider a new role in the political arena for BRICS, for the BRICS members? Because after all, if we assume that they want to have some sort of economic ties and they want to define a new type of economic system, you have to consider geopolitical issues. You have to consider military issues with the West, with the United States. Are they gonna, when would that happen? Is that in the near future? We are far away from that moment, or they're gonna get to the point? As you mentioned, China is openly talking about what's going on in the South China Sea. How, when that would come to BRICS? We know that BRICS is much more. We have Brazil, India, these South Africa, Iran, and other countries. It's so much important to have a broader communication with these countries.
Absolutely. It's not going to be now. It's not going to be this year, Nima. I hate to be the bearer of not bad news, but a little bit of realism. This Brazilian presidency is not up to their task, to say the least. I prefer not to get into detail. In fact, I prefer to go to Rio first and see what the Brazilians are going to do at the BRICS presidency, because I can compare directly to what the Russians did last year, because I spent half of last year in Russia, mostly following the preparation towards the BRICS summit in Kazan. So I prefer to answer your question in detail after the BRICS meeting. Considering that at the moment we are in a total clash between the Trump administration and BRICS practically as a whole, the tariff wars, as we have discussed extensively, it's part of a war against BRICS. It's part of a hybrid war against BRICS and most BRICS, in fact, practically the whole of BRICS, including the partners. Some of the highest tariffs were against Southeast Asian nations. So there won't be any breakthrough at the summit this year. But the great thing about BRICS is what is developed discreetly in the background in what I call the BRICS lab. All these models that they are testing for something, for instance, when we have this declaration earlier this week that Indonesia, top BRICS member, and China, top BRICS member, from now on will only trade in their own currencies. This is part of the BRICS test lab advancing all the time. So we're going to have a lot more trade among intra-BRICS in their own currencies and multilateral trade inside BRICS in their own currencies, but we won't have anything bombastic that's going to be announced in Rio, of course. So the BRICS lab continues its work. That's the great part of it, because this is a long-term process. And then there's the number one issue. I was discussing this today with some Thai connections. Our friend Michael Hudson, his number one point, it's impossible for most BRICS nations, if not all of them, to develop as long as the debt problem is not solved. So this should be the number one discussion among, I would say, the BRICS Business Council and those BRICS meetings dedicated to geoeconomics specifically. This is something that we're going to see some results of no result whatsoever, only at the meeting in Rio in July. But this is the key issue. And this would imply that all BRICS and all partners say, okay, we have to have our own collective position vis-a-vis debt, unpayable debt towards the usual suspects. Michael proposes something very drastic, that this debt should not be paid. If that happens, expect an earthquake, a geopolitical and geoeconomic earthquake. So BRICS are not there yet. This might happen, okay, within the next 2 to 3 years, for instance, depending on how the global economy is fluctuating and depending on the results of the Trump tariffs as well. Many nations inside BRICS may, okay, we had enough. That's it. So this tension before the BRICS summit, it can be very positive because it may accelerate the process. Because the key nations inside BRICS, don't forget, 3 of them under sanctions. Russia, China, and Iran are under sanctions. BRICS is a platform that has to discuss the effects of sanctions in parallel to the effects of tariffs as well. So this might accelerate something. India, once again, it's a basket case. And Brazil, it's, how can I define it succinctly? You live in Brazil, Nema, so you know the clash between the rentier ruling classes in Brazil, which are among the most nefarious on the planet, and the progressive instinct of some of the best minds in Brazil. So you see this clash, living in Brazil, you see this every day, right? So who's going to have the last word, at least for the foreseeable future. And these problems inside the machinery of government in Brazil, including Minister of Finance and Minister of Foreign Relations. They are not exactly the best, the brightest lamps in the room, so some of them. So it's complicated. And the fact that most of the Brazilian ruling classes, they don't want Brazil to be a big power. They are comprador elites. So all that you have to solve all these problems, or at least try to start solving all these problems. It's not going to be until the BRICS summit that they're going to solve it. So in the end, I would say something peculiar might be in the works. If Lula still has the reflexes of the old Lula that we used to know, he looks at the chessboard, he looks at the opportunity of a BRICS presidency in Brazil, and he can come up with something groundbreaking, he will take this opportunity. If he doesn't, then we'll know for sure that this is not the Lula that we knew, and that's over. And Brazil has to find another leader, which, by the way, doesn't exist. And you know that very well, David. Exactly. So all these tensions pre-BRICS summit all of them are ultra important, and they are all interconnected once again. And of course, how the fact that this recent trip by Lula to both Russia and China was a very good sign. Very, very good sign. So how he's going to capitalize on his latest trips to Russia and China, the two top BRICS, and how the two top BRICS are going to help him to come up with something larger than life out of the summit. That's why these next few weeks are going to be quite something.
Exactly. And we're going to talk about it.
Of course.
Muito obrigado, Pepe. Grande
Obrigado a
prazer.
você, querido.
Como sempre.
Cuide-se. Eu vou te visitar aí nos BRICS. Cheers.
Te vejo.
Te
Tchau.
vejo.
Tchau.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye-bye.